I'd like to open a public hearing, and Tim Zuber will make the presentation for Wendell on the proposed changes to the signage requirements in the town of Wheatfield, Chapter 169 of the subdivision of land. Tim, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Is this on? There it is.
Is that on?
That's on.
Yes.
Hello. I'm just
Sure.
quiet talker. Good evening, everyone. As you're aware, we've been looking at the town's signage requirements and what modifications we can make to our town code to have developers of subdivisions cover the cost of putting in new signs as opposed to the town that currently pays for those signs. So we concentrated actually on our subdivision of lands, Chapter 169 of the town code. And we've actually found two places where we're proposing additions and changes to the existing law to cover that. The first change is under our Article 4 of that Chapter 169, which is about design standards. It's under this section where the code lists some sort of minimum requirements, like the minimum radius for a road and different road grades that are allowed without vertical curves. So basic geometrical design requirements. So what we're proposing for that is to add one more item to that, which would be item Q, which would be for signage. And I'll read real quick what we're proposing to add. That would say under signage, the type, in parenthesis, size, shape, and style of street name sign shall be in accordance with town standards. All new streets shall also require the appropriate traffic control signage in accordance with the National Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or MUTCD, the current edition, including the New York State Supplement current edition, and or as requested by the town. All signage types and locations must be shown on the construction drawings. Street name signage and traffic control signage will be provided by and installed by the town of Wheatfield at the cost of the developer or applicant. These costs shall be based on an approved sign fee schedule, and the total cost of the developer or applicant will be finalized by the town during the PIP process. These costs must be paid to the town prior to sign installation, and installation must be complete prior to final acceptance of the PIP. So that's what we would propose to be added under our design requirements section. The only other section is under Article 5, which is documents submitted. And under Section 16929B14, it already lists a number of things. So, and we're proposing just to add to that list street signs and traffic control signs. It already lists construction drawings, including plans, profiles, cross sections as required. So we're adding those two things into there as included to be documents for submitted. So this is our draft verbiage to put in there to cover those changes. As we go through this process and hear comments, we may add to that or change things on there, but that's where we're starting off at. I believe we've got one thing that we're already going to add into here is really based on new subdivision plans. So we had somebody ask, well, what do we do about an existing subdivision that's not complete, that still has more phases to do? So our intent would be to add on to that Q comment that if it's an existing approved subdivision, that those sign types and locations would be determined by the town engineer and the highway superintendent during the PIP approval process.
You know, just a comment, and I know with zoning law changes, et cetera, when we make changes, you know, it may be an approved subdivision, but, you know, Abe, maybe you can guide me with this, but if we make this change, I think that any subdivision, even though it's been approved or not, should have to comply with the change in the law. That's my opinion.
Correct. Usually our reviews say that when we look at the PIP applications, that all work is to be done to current town standards. So if that's a new standard,
if that's the case and we do adopt this, then whether the next phase has been approved or not, it still has to go through further review. They would have to adhere to the new standards and the fees.
Correct. And typically all the phases in a subdivision are approved at one time. It's just that they come in with PIP applications to build each phase.
Right.
So that's why it'd have to be handled a little bit different with an existing subdivision that's already approved, because those signs will not be shown on those plans.
Thank you, Tim. We also have a proposed fee schedule for the signage that's available for review. And of course, we'll close the public hearing tonight when everyone is through, and that fee schedule will be part of the schedule of fees with the town, so we can change those fees at any time we want. It won't be part of the change in the law.
Are there any questions?
Any questions, folks? Yes.
So being on the disaster committee here, the task force, with the signage, what I'm seeing in the town of Wheatfield, there's no evacuation signage at all. So at what point are we gonna have somebody liable for some kind of evacuation signage? You're telling me traffic, signs, this, that, and the other. So before Wheatfield gets too populated and a disaster happens, and we have no signage and everybody just doesn't know where they're going, is that something we can implement in that with subdivisions going forward? Or I don't know. I mean, they're telling me to go find evacuation routes, and if you drive around, there are none. So if something happens tonight,
I don't
nobody knows where to
think
go.
we would want to include this in the subdivision regulations, but it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, somewhere we have to put that somewhere.
I know you're working on the disaster preparedness plan, and I'm glad you are. But I think that's a good idea, some evacuation routes, you know, because we always think it's never going to happen in our town. And I met with, I believe, Mike Zarbo is the gentleman that's coordinator. We had a good meeting, and hopefully we'll come up with a updated disaster preparedness town, and maybe that's something, if you want to bring up at your meeting, maybe an evacuation route or posted evacuation routes on maps that would be available for anyone. So it's a great idea. Thank you.
I just had one question on subdivision signs, not street signs, but we're discouraging them, right? When they get a new subdivision, the developers in the past, like 20 years ago, would put a nice little sign up there, and after 20 years it would get hit by a car or a snowplow or something and taken out, and then the subdivision residents would be looking at the town to replace it like they did at Thornwood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've got something on the book that says that the town will pay like 20%. And the residents, I think, had to pay 80%. I don't remember the percentage, but it was a big percentage. But we've taken some out. Highway, you've taken some out in the past too, haven't you? So there is anything in there discouraging those or eliminating? You know, I know the contractors and subdivision, they like putting their, you know, this is my new subdivision sign in front of the street. So everybody.
Yeah, this would not cover a subdivision sign like
I know, but are we discouraging those types of signs in islands now?
I believe they're still allowed in our regulation where there's.
To be perfectly honest with you, I mean, you know, I worked in Lewiston also, and some of the subdivision entrance signs are quite nice and attractive.
Yeah.
And what it does is also identify a particular subdivision or neighborhood. So that people are traveling from out of town, say at Christmas time, and they recognize the sign Thornwood Estates, they know where to go. I think
when if it's in our right of way, then.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but maybe we can something we should discuss at a further time about placement of those signs, so that they're ultimately responsible for the repair. And if they let them go, we'll take them down.
Right. This is really concentrated on just the street signs and traffic control.
Anything else, folks? I can have a motion to close the public hearing, please.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Public hearing